The Argentine Colt 1927, let's check it out. Argentina adopted the Colt 1911 A1 as their official military sidearm in World War I. In 1927, they passed some laws that wanted to secure firearm development and manufacturing there in Argentina, so they wouldn't be dependent on foreign governments. They purchased 10,000 Colt 1911 A1s for their military and then began to work a deal with Colt to actually produce 1911s there in Argentina. Colt sent the blueprints and engineers down to Argentina to set up a factory. And Argentina began producing their own 1911s. This is an exact copy of a 1911 A1. All the parts are compatible. This is a forged slide and forged steel receiver with forged barrel. And a lot of the other parts are milled. This is a really high quality firearm, and a lot of handwork went into these pistols. Now, over 100,000 Argentine 1927s were produced and used all the way up until the Falkland Wars and beyond. These also outfitted a lot of police agencies and were made for commercial use. Now, back in the 90s, a lot of these were imported into the United States, and you can find them around. Also, their counterpart, the Baluster Molina, which is also a .45 ACP pistol, but there are some differences with it, and that was also made in Argentina. We're going to do a little bit of a comparison between those two. But for a quality-made 1911 that has a military pedigree, these are really excellent pistols. The Colt System Model 1927, a licensed copy of the Colt 1911 A1. All the parts are interchangeable. There are a few differences, but they're very minor, they're very cosmetic. This was made under Colt engineers and also all the blueprints from Colt. Argentina made a deal with the Colt company, first importing about 10,000 Colt models that were actually marked for the Argentine Army, and then wanted production for themselves. And really, the capabilities in Argentina are really high for making good quality firearms. The slide and the receiver and the barrel are all forged. A lot of the parts that were cut out of some of those pieces were actually used for other parts. This is a really well-made 1911. I first saw these in the early 90s when they were being imported. Guys, they were coming in at a very reasonable price. I think these were coming in at about $299, and maybe even a little bit cheaper. Also, during that time, the Baluster Molina. Now, this is also made in Argentina. It is a 1911 design, but there are some things about it lacking a grip safety and a few things. The parts are not quite as interchangeable. You'll see these type grips with the grooves, and this is standard for the Baluster Molina, but I have never seen them on the Colt 1927, and the grips are not interchangeable. So I don't know if these were made in Argentina and they were part of the run, but typically these come with either a wood grip or they come with plastic grips. Let's go ahead and make sure the gun is unloaded. We're going to drop our 7-round magazine, and it is a standard magazine. It even has the serial number on the bottom. We'll check the chamber, and the gun is empty. Now this again is just like your Colt 1911. I mean, it is really remarkable how close this is, and honestly up to Colt standards. It has the older style frame safety, and then we have our grip safety right here. and it is that little tang on the end, which is typical for most of your Colts. Of course, your slide stop here, it's nicely checkered. The mainspring housing is arched, but it is checkered beautifully with a lanyard loop. And then we have our hammer, which is that standard tang hammer. A couple of things that Argentina changed is there is a little bit of a sharp edge right here on the grip safety and on the hammer, just a little more than your standard Colt. And of course, you have checkering here at the hammer. It's nicely styled and it's wide, it's easy to grab, and you can thumb cock it. And, you know, it's just a beautiful piece, honestly. Low profile combat style sights. Now, this model actually has a little bit raised over the originals, but you can see, I mean, it is pretty much just a small blade and just a little notch at the back. And these are combat sights, and they're made like the Colts were. The trigger is nicely checkered, so your finger's not going to slip off. Of course, you know, your rounded trigger guard. Everything typically is very similar to your Colt. One thing also that they did, this is one of the older models. This was actually, according to the serial numbers, made in 1952. But some of the later models, they actually brought this radius up a little bit. Just some very slight changes. Now, this is actually a military firearm, but they took a lot of these and they got rid of the seal and put some other markings on here, and then they sold those to civilian market or to civilian police markets. Typically, these were only used with the military and with federal police agencies. Now, there was a Navy model, and one of the ways that's easy to tell is the barrel, and this also goes with the commercial versions as well. It was blued, and then it's milled, and so it has kind of a steel finish to it, like the Colts did. So this has just that black all the way through. And it has the black oxide bluing. So it's not quite the high polished blue that the Colts had, but it still has some reflection. It's beautiful. I mean, this pistol is 60 years old. And of course, obviously with some of the older model Colts, I mean, you can get all the way back to 1911. Now, the steel parts are made from SAE 1045 or 1050 steel. And the barrels as well. Now, the barrels were actually overpressured during testing to make sure that they would hold up. And each one was shot one magazine load, and actually the sights were lined up at the factory. And again, it has that 5-inch barrel, which is standard for the government models. Smooth front strap, which is typical for that time. And guys, I mean, it's just an old 1911, but it's still tight. I mean, there is no movement, or very little movement, from slide to frame. And they're using the old barrel bushing with the recoil spring plug, and it's nicely checkered as well. But guys, I'm telling you, there is very, very little movement slide to frame. The serrations, typical for Colt. But here on the slide, this is where things get a little different. You have your DG, FM, and then FM, AP. You have your crest right here, and then we have our serial numbers. Now you'll notice that the serial numbers, every one are matching. And with the barrel, early models had it across this way. With the later models, it was going down the barrel. And then here on the slide again, and even the magazine is a matching serial number. And I'm sure when a lot of these were imported for surplus, you know, they had the matching serial numbers, but I'm sure there are plenty out there that don't have that. Now, the ejection port on a lot of the later models were expanded out, and this just allowed for brass to come out a little bit easier. Now, the 1911 is a single-action semi-automatic pistol, and the way that works is load up 7 rounds in your magazine, put it into the mag well, rack the slide. And that puts 1 round right here in the chamber. If you take your safety and you lift it up, now it's cocked and locked. And so it is in safe mode. This grip safety right here has to be pressed for this gun to fire. And so if we pull the trigger, you can see there's no action, as long as this grip safety is not pressed. Once we drop the safety, without hitting the grip safety, it's not going to fire. And that's the way all your 1911s are. Once you depress that grip safety, it'll fire. Now, a lot of people will carry it with one in the chamber and they engage their frame safety. And this is a safe way to carry it, because this is a passive safety and it's not going to fire unless this is pressed. And guys, to be honest, this is a passive safety and you don't even really notice it, and you just push it in, drop it, and you're ready to fire. And so it's really a very safe firearm to carry. And this was really done because the U.S. military required the grip safety on this pistol. And of course, Argentina carried it through. Now the Baluster Molina, the serrations are a lot different on the side, and this one has had some upgrades with the sight. I found this at a local gun show, and I really got it for a great price. This has been a number of years ago. The mainspring is actually integral with the frame. I've done some reviews on this one, and the beaver tail is just part of the frame. But overall, I mean, a lot of the different operations are the same, even down to the safety. And your slide stop and the trigger, which the trigger is smooth on this one. And the mag release is not checkered, it's just intertwining circles. But you have your standard barrel bushing and guide rod spring plug. And here is my Model 70 Series Colt. I have brought this one out quite a bit. You can see that it's pretty much on this side very similar. There are very few differences. But here you'll notice that the frame safety is a little bit different. This is a later style frame safety. But guys, overall, pretty much, I mean, they're very similar, and again, all of these parts interchange. Now, 1911s are known for just incredible trigger pulls, and part of that is because it's a single action. But we're going to go ahead and look at it anyway. Right here, there's a little bit of take up, very little. And then a very crisp, nice break. Reset, right there. And we'll check the trigger pull weight with our Lyman trigger gauge from Brownells. 4 pounds, 3.9 ounces. 4 pounds, 1.5 ounces. And the weight on the model 1927. 2 pounds, 4.8 ounces. It's an all steel frame piece. We really appreciate Fiocchi for sponsoring the ammo, all made in the USA. One of the largest suppliers of ammunition in the country. Now guys, I love 1911s, love taking them out to the range. They're just as popular today as they've ever been. But when you take an original vintage military surplus 1911 of really high quality, there's just something about it. It connects you to the past. But it's just a smooth shooting gun, and a lot of that has to do with the quality that the Argentines put into these pistols. But still, 1911, it doesn't have the high ride beaver tail or the flat mainspring housing or the commander hammer. But man, it shot really well. We were shooting just 230 grain Fiocchi ball. Just functioned very well. A very pointable gun. The sights definitely are very low to the slide. And made for combat. No snag. I mean, just to get the job done. But there's something about the shootability of a 1911 to me. It's just that thin grip, the slide. I mean, it's very pointable. I just love shooting them. And, really with something like a 1927, I'm not going to conceal carry this anyway, but you could. One problem with this type hammer is that if you have really large hands and with that little nub on the grip safety, it can bite you on the hand. This is a basic, 1911,
yep.
Just that tang safety, grip safety, the combat sights, but it shoots really well. For me, now I have smaller hands, so this doesn't affect me, but it does affect you.
It does, yeah. I've got a little hammer bite here, so the hand's bleeding a little bit from the back of the beaver tail and it pinching between the beaver tail and the hammer, just because I high grip the 1911s so much. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yep, gonna bleed today. But, hey, for you guys, right?
Well, I didn't. It shoots really well. I really like the beaver tail, but this is a classic and military surplus. And it did the job.
I got to tell you, I've been really impressed with the reliability of this pistol. It's been 100% all day today.
Yeah,
throw a mag in it, rack the slide, bang, bang, bang. It does what it's supposed to do. I was standing back watching it while you were shooting a while ago, and the ejection path is very consistent. All the brass comes out, dumps it all in one nice, neat little pile on the ground, which tells me that the extractor's tuned properly in the gun, the ejector's tuned properly in the gun, and it's all working in concert with one another with a correct recoil spring.
Right, and this is just your basic 1911.
It is. It's very basic. It doesn't have the lowered flared ejection port on it.
That's true.
It's got the standard original Colt ejection port on it, and Yeah, the gun just shoots well. It shoots very well.
We're shooting full metal jacket.
230 grain ball.
If we were shooting, you know, self-defense loads, we may have a few issues.
It could be different if we were shooting some of your flying ashtrays in it.
Yeah, but overall, we've really enjoyed it.
It shot well.
Now for disassembly. We've got our magazine removed. We're going to go ahead and check, make sure the gun is unloaded. First thing you want to do is to go up to your barrel bushing and you press in this recoil spring plug, and then you turn the barrel bushing clockwise. Now hold spring press. This is under spring pressure, so hold on to it, and then it just lifts right out. Now you can take off your plug, and then take that barrel bushing and go back to the other side. Now it'll stop at about the 5 o'clock position, and you just pull that right out. And if you'll notice on the bushing itself, there's a small little catch right here that corresponds with the groove in the barrel. And that's what lets this out. Now you'll notice that this is a solid barrel bushing. Then bring back your slide and line it up to this little crescent notch. Then we're going to take our slide stop from the other side. You can see the little button. And you just push it out. Then you can just pull out your slide stop. And then just let the slide go forward. Pull out our recoil spring and guide rod. And then we're going to drop our barrel link and just pull the barrel right out of the front of the slide. Definitely a lot different than your modern type pistols, but honestly, it's not really a big deal once you get used to it. But the machining inside is really well done. These were handcrafted, and just a beautiful finish on these pistols. Of course, it's a little bit dirty from shooting, but these are, again, forged, and if you have a forged slide and barrel, I mean, it gives it a lot of service life. Now for reassembly, just re-enter your barrel. Now your barrel link is where your slide stop is going to go through, so you want to pay attention to that. Then we're going to put in our recoil spring, and we're going to put in our guide rod. We're just going to go ahead and slip it in. Now we're going to take this, making sure that link's in place, and we're going to put this over our frame. Now take your slide stop and making sure that it goes into the barrel link. Now you'll notice this little detent, and it's protruded out just a little more than normal, and I'm having trouble getting my slide stop to pop in there. So I'm going to take this small screwdriver, get that lined up, and then just pop it right into place. Typically that's not what you have to do, but if that detent's sticking out, you're going to have to do that. One thing you don't want to do is to scratch your frame, so make sure you bring that up really close to the detent when you're putting it in. It's called an idiot scratch, and that's just the way it is. So we're going to push this forward. Next, take your barrel bushing, have those fingers going out to about 5 o'clock, and then you can just spin this around. Now we're going to take our recoil spring guide rod plug, and we're going to depress it back into the slide, holding it with your fingers. Now you'll get it right there, and it'll catch. And then just push it on through. If you are not careful, this thing will go flying. Okay, and once you have it to where you can function it, it does mean that the slide stop is into the barrel link. Test for function. And we're good to go. Now to show you a little bit of the evolution from the 1911 to today's standards. This is a Springfield Armory Garrison, and it's actually one of their basic models. But even so, you have your beaver tail, which really rides up high. It gives you a high ride on the pistol, better for low bore axes. It has a commander hammer. Of course, you have your diamond type wood grips. You have a competition skeletonized trigger. It has a flat mainspring housing. And of course, the sights have definitely been upgraded. And so those are some things about these pistols that just really take this to the next level. Is this still a great shooter? Yes. But honestly, you know, grabbing this and that hammer, if you do have larger hands like we've seen with Robbie, I mean, it can bite you right here. And so this really keeps that from happening by just riding that up. And so the hammer just falls into the beaver tail instead of into your top of your hand. Also, you'll notice that the ejection port is actually expanded out past where the Colt was. And you can see, I mean, it is a pretty big difference between the two. But again, guys, overall, this is a great shooting handgun. It doesn't have to be state-of-the-art. It went through World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and still serves all over the world. Now, from what I understand, Argentina stopped producing these around 1966. Of course, they continued to use these all the way through the Falkland Island Wars, and of course, a lot of police agencies and civilians still have these. And there are surplus models that have made their way to the U.S., and so there are some of these pistols still available. You can find them on Gunbroker. While the price is not really cheap, it's considerably less than its Colt counterpart, even though these were made on Colt machinery with Colt engineers on hand, especially at the beginning. So it does have a lot of quality to it. Again, forged slide, frame, barrel, a lot of the parts. There's no mem parts here. I mean, the hand fitting that went into this, the testing, including overpressure rounds and testing for accuracy. Just a really iconic, beautifully made piece, and, you know, just part of history. I mean, the one we have, it functioned flawlessly. If you do have issues, it's totally compatible with your 1911 A1. So you can continue to repair this if you need to. You can upgrade it. You can do whatever you want to. I mean, the sky's the limit, but I highly recommend keeping it just like it is. There's just something about old military surplus firearms. It just has a lot of soul to it. And there are so many different options out there all across the world. Now, the supply is not what it used to be, and unfortunately, when it first comes into the country, it is really reasonable. But once the supply dries up, then the demand goes up and prices go up. And so that's one of the big things about finding military surplus. If you can get it cheap, then great. If not, you know, you get what you get. But it still doesn't mean the quality is not there. And just like with this 1927, I mean, it is an excellent firearm. And of course, it shoots 45 ACP, which makes it really nice. And again, compatible with all your Colt parts. So the Systema Colt, model 1927, is just an excellent firearm. Rubber Dummies is one of the best training tools on the market, and you get a 10% discount using Sootch00 when you click the link down in the description. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic.
The camera and I was like, you need to bring the gun up.
Hold on.
We done?
Yep. Where y'all going? Y'all leaving me up here by myself?
Make sure these are recording. Okay.
Don't bother you, it's gonna be bothering me to have to sit there and go, why I keep turning that off?
Well, it will bother me because you're gonna come up and be like, I have to do all this with the cameras.
They began to produce but they didn't get beginning 11 Colts for their military. Near as expensive as a military Good gosh! General de Fabrique. Okay. General de Fabrique.
I'm way down here.